Assiya Berkenova is a brilliant Kazakh akyn, improvising poet and singer. People's Artist of Kazakhstan has made an important contribution to preserve the nomadic art of aitys, a traditional contest of improvised oral poetry sung to the accompaniment of traditional musical instruments, which was on the verge of extinction. If we consider aitys from the point of view of the Kazakh folk tradition, what is its main essence? What is the essence of its culture?
Aitys деген айту емес. Aitys дегеннің өзі кем деген екі адам болу керек деген сөз ғой, бір-бірімен сөйлесу.
First of all, I want to say that aitys is not a monologue. The word aitys implies that two people are involved in it. So it is a kind of a dialogue, a conversation, a verbal competition with one another, a poetic competition. Aitys is a very engaging performance art. It involves not just the two people, the akyns competing against each other, but also the audience. This is high art and it requires a certain code of conduct. Once I had to remind that to one of my opponents who allowed himself a little too much. They consider us equal, however, my ego is not as big as yours. Only by respecting other talents, a poet can demonstrate his eminence.
Ақынның абыройы асқан емес деп. Негізінде сол сыйластық, ол уақытша жарты сағаттық жаңағы айтысып отырған адамың сенің ата жауың емес.
In fact, there has to be a mutual respect. A person who becomes your opponent for half an hour should not become your worst enemy. He is only your opponent in this contest, in this verse. A performer must remain tactful. This is the most important revelation for our followers. In my opinion, it is extremely important not to allow rude treatment towards your viewers. Every action and every word must be balanced and decent.
Жаңа эстетикалық тәрбиесі, жаңағы талғамдық тәрбиесі болады. Айтыстың да тәрбиелік мәні зор деп ойлаймын. Өйткені, мысалы 80 жылдардағы айтыстың ең бірінші мақсаты сол айтыс.
One of the main goals of popularizing any art is to convey its educational function to the viewers. Aitys also bears the national ethical education. In the 1980s, the main goal was to revive the national art and attract as many viewers as possible. Nowadays, considering that aitys is already one of the most popular forms of art among the people, we should do everything possible to make it first of all an educative one. In the 1980s, we tried to identify and solve the societal problems. Now, in the 21st century, the main task of akyns is to preserve the national identity, to make a real impact on the younger generation, to teach them to value their culture and language. I believe that to be the main purpose and mission of modern aitys.
Ұлт ретінде сақтап қалуға ықпалын тигізетін ұрпақ ретінде тәрбиелеуге ең басты мәні сол болу керек деп ойлаймын.
Is it possible to psychologically put pressure on your opponent during aitys?
Sure, that is possible.
And how often do you restrain yourself at such moments?
Енді мені ойынша көрермендердің көбісі осы бір қардың қызындай қатып қалған күлмесханның қызы деген сияқты.
I often hear how many of my fans call me a nice girl, hard as steel, daughter of Khan, meaning a man who doesn't smile, a princess who never smiled. Probably this is my stage image. People say you're cold, like the northern lands where you were born. But I did not specifically create such an image by myself. Apparently, this is very close to my nature. Therefore, probably, I have such an image, such a stage presence.
Бет-бейне келбет шығар. Өйткені сабаққа кірердің алдында, мысалы, коридорда өзіңнің әріптесіңменен сыныпқа жеткенше сөйлесіп келе жатып, жымиып күліп келе жатсаң да, сыныпқа кіргеннен кейін жаңағы сабаққа енді ұстаз ретінде өзі.
I used to teach, so if before class I could walk down the corridor and smilingly talk to a colleague, then after entering the classroom I was always reserved as a teacher. Probably this has influenced me in many respects and formed me in my stage image. If we're talking about my rivals in aitys, then I haven't met any rude people among them. And maybe this is due to my composure. It is strange somehow, but it seems as if they're performing with only one thought, just to get out of there unscathed. In 1996, Taras hosted a large aitys devoted to the 150th birth anniversary of Jambul Jabayev. Then I competed with my brilliant colleague, now the late Yesinkul Jakubekov. By nature, he loved to joke, so during that aitys, he joked a lot and made everyone laugh. And I laughed heartily. It was a lot of fun. And after that, I heard someone wondering that I was able to laugh during the aitys. I was surprised at this, because in life I'm not like that. But I'm sure that the opponent must be defeated with the mind, not with composure, but without hurting anyone's pride. I won a lot of competitions without compromising the honor or pride of my opponent and without putting salt on someone else's wound.
Жеңіп те жүрген сияқтымын өзім. Солай болған сияқты маған енді. Қазылардың берген бағасына байланысты, намысына тимей, ешкімнің жарасын тырнамай-ақ, жаңағы сабырлы қалпымды сақтап та талай жеңістерге жеттім.
Әңгіме қазылық дегеннен шығады, қазір өз басыңыз республикалық деңгейде өтеді.
Now you judge aitys of Republican level. What criteria do you use?
Қандай өлшемге сай бағалайсыз?
Мен өзім мектепте жүргенде, мысалы жаңа бақылау диктанттары, тағы шығарма жұмыстары болғанда, дәптердің соңынан бастап ашатынмын.
When I worked in school, I always opened the notebook from the end to check the essays and papers. I did not know whose work I was reading, and only after reading and assessing, I learned who the author was. Therefore, in assessing the aitys participants, I focus on the level of the culture of speech, the way competitors express their thoughts. Not everything that comes out of the mouth is poetry. Not everything that is sung is a song. The essence of the speaker's words is important. The culture of aitys performance, the meaning of speech should correspond to the topic. There are a lot of pitfalls in this art. For example, in many regions, the jury has several criteria for evaluation, such as the ability to express one's thoughts, how well they reveal the topic, the level of dombra performance, appearance, and we assess all of this. But for me, the beauty of the verse is especially important.
Сөз саптауы, тақырыпты ашуы, домбыра қағысы, әні, үйлесімі, киім киісі деген бір пункттарды солай жазып қояды. Енді соның бәрін айтпағанмен де іштей соның бәрін бақылап отырасың. Солған әсіресе сөзі қымбат мен үшін.
The mindset is very important for the master of aitys. How much time do you spend on preparing for each aitys?
Алып жаңағы айтысқа дайындалдым деп айта алмаймын.
I cannot say that I prepare for aitys, leaving all of my other affairs behind. But of course, if aitys is dedicated to a certain historical figure or takes place in honor of a poet, then naturally you need to research about the person before the aitys. But I never write and memorize my lines in advance. You can watch any of my aitys and you will realize the most interesting interaction happens when the participants are engaged in each other. They ask each other questions or tease each other in their performance. The best poetry is created during the improvisation. It is impossible to prepare for such a dialogue in advance. We also make sure to praise the place that is hosting the aitys, the local people's achievements, some of their heroes and historical figures that were born on that land. This is natural.
Бірақ мен енді сондай болдым, мен сондай адаммын енді өзім.
Айтыстың нағыз...
Is this the nature of aitys?
Не табиғаты сонда ғой?
Yes, this is the nature of aitys, debating on the spot, a question-answer, and so on.
Сізге көбіне көп.
With whom do you mostly like to compete?
Көбіне көп, енді жастармен шыққанда мен олардың психологиясын түсінемін енді. Ойбай, Ассия апаймен шығамыз деп жаңағы мөлтектетіп сыйласып.
Well, for example, when I compete with young people, I already know their psychology. They think, wow, we will compete with Assiya apay. And they compete with me with respect and even with fear. I can notice that. Some of these competitions are good. For example, the aitys with Dauret Kapula dedicated to the celebration of the first anniversary of our capital was excellent. He showed his respect, his civic position and courage. He also showed some of his childish sides. During the aitys devoted to the 120th anniversary of Qajmoqan Mungaitpasala, I competed with Amanjol Altaev. The aitys was like a dialogue of a mother and a son. It was just a wonderful aitys. I really liked competing with Amanjol. He's very well-mannered and eloquent. I also like to compete in verse against Bekarız Shoybekov. He has such an ability to catch you at such moments when you don't expect it, and he makes you constantly think, oh, how can I answer back? Also, Muhammadjan Tazabekov is very educated. These are the performers that challenge me. As they say, they cut me without a knife. I enjoyed the aitys with Esenkul Jakubekov. Esenkul had a great sense of humor.
Есенқұлмен айтысқан ұнайтын тұғын. Есенқұлдың әзілдері әдемі болатын.
Өзіңіз туралы.
We have prepared a small report about you. Let's watch it. In 1984, during aitys timed to the 100th anniversary of Kenan Azirbayev in Almaty, Assiya Berkenova received recognition from the audience. Since then, the public admires the akyn, who has been reviving the favorite genre of Kazakh folk art. In 1990, she received the title People's Poet of Kazakhstan for the contribution to the development of aitys.
Assiya
Berkenova has her own special path. At that time, there were few Kazakhs living in the Kostanay region. This is because the area is closer to the north. She was born in this region and worked as the teacher of the Russian language and literature. The fact that she came out of such a region and became a follower of well-known akyns improvisers was great news for both aitys and Kazakh art. Assiya Berkenova worked for many years as a teacher in the Nauezim district of Kostanay region. She taught Russian language and literature at school. The owner of innate talent, who has repeatedly proved it at various sites, still teaches art to the youth. Assiya Berkenova has the on-air studio at Kostanay Ahmet Baytusinov State University. In this studio, we got the first experience of poetic creativity. Assiya Berkenova taught us the structure of versification. In the 80s, aitys was not only revived but even updated. What are the features of this aitys?
Көптен ұмытылып қалып, халық арасында ескіліктің бір көрсеткіші ретінде қарап жүрген өнердің ұлттық әлемде теңдесі жоқ.
In the 1980s, the aitys underwent its renaissance. This was the time when our national magnificent art of aitys, unparalleled in the world, began to revive and was glorified among the people. This became an incentive for young generations of performers to appear. A whole new school of true talents, poets, improvisers was formed. Poets who had the ability to improvise did not know where to apply their talent. And then suddenly they had a platform where they could fully realize themselves and rise on the pedestal of national glory. Famous and old akyns like Manap Kokenov, Koken Shakeyev, Khalilkhan Altınbayev gave impetus for the further development of the genre. We followed in the footsteps of the true talents.
Кейінгі буынға біздерге үлкен ой салып, үлкен түрткі болды. Біз шын дарын ағалардың, шын сорып салма ақын ағалардың соңынан ертік.
What did you aspire to?
Ол кезде мен енді бұл мақтанышты емес, өзім менмендікте емес, негізінде біреуге қарап бой түзедім деп айта алмаймын.
Well, this may sound like boasting or a manifestation of self-love, but I cannot say that at that time I aspired to imitate anyone. I knew that I was good at improvisation because during various get-togethers and holidays, I could impromptu come up with comic verses. In the 1980s, my spouse challenged me saying, "Listen, aitys is right for you. Why don't you participate?" At that time, I thought it was impossible for me to participate in aitys. I was an ordinary school teacher. But in general, I cannot say that I had an idol or a person whom I thought as a role model. But I can say that I educated and trained myself, because in those days there were only a few women on the aitys scene. There were no women I could learn from.
Айтыскер қыз келіншектер аз болды. Еліктейтін алдымызда ерке сылқым айтыскер келіншектер болмады.
When was your very first aitys?
80-ші жылдары жаңағы өзіміз...
In the 1980s, we had teachers in the village, local improvisational poets, Angsahan Torin and Abulqasım Tayirbergenov. I competed with them during small gatherings. At the same time, they began to develop the culture of aitys at the Republican level, and they themselves passed a selection round at the regional level. It was in 1982. To get to the Republican tournament, I first went through the selection at the level of my region. At that time, I worked as a school deputy principal and came to the special education department to submit a report. There I met Yesetay Kalkayev, the head of the regional department of culture, and asked him why we didn't have aitys tournaments. A great aitys competition had taken place in Almaty, so I suggested holding one in our region. He wondered who would participate in it, so I said that I would perform on behalf of the village. He knew I was a teacher of the Russian language, and so he was perplexed how I was going to compete in the Kazakh improvisational verse and singing. I answered, just put my name to represent the village. So I performed on behalf of the Razdolny village, and the rest is history now.
Can we say that you brought to the present generation the heritage of our ancestors in its original unchanged form?
20 ғасырдың 80-ші жылдары қолға алынып, әсіресе мына Жүрсін Ерманның жаңағы бастауыменен әрі қарай шарықтау шегіне жеткен айтыстың.
We are considered the generation that both revived and developed aitys. Led by Жүрсін Ерман, this art reached its peak when it was thoroughly developed in the 1980s. Aitys of the time retained the form of aitys of the end of the 18th century and beginning of the 19th century as the primordially poetic contest of improvisers. The new generation of akyns who came after us perform aitys that contains the elements of terme, tolgao, as well as a mix of other types of singing. I once told a poet, I love a verse that is like a stream, and I'm waiting for a syllable beautiful as a dough. But your aitys style is like a candle stub, like coarse woven fabric. That is, after some time, tolgao, terme, words of edification and teachings with the help of clever thoughts became popular. I do not say this is superfluous or out of place, but such elements have been added later. In my opinion, in the 1980s, we had a real and pure aitys, where improvisation was dominating.
Мен былай дедім, менің ойым былай, сенің ойың былай деген сияқты жаңағы суырып салма, қолма-қол айтысу басымырақ болды деп ойлаймын.
Әрине 80-ші жылдардағы айтыспен.
Of course it is impossible to compare aitys of the 80s with a modern one. But still, what are their features and differences between each other? What are their disadvantages?
Кемшін тұстары қандай?
Бұл айтыс кәдімгідей жаңғырғаннан кейін, енді бізден кейінгілердің енді айтуы бойынша, мысалы, Серік Құсанбаев бар, Жадыра шықты, Альпия шықты, тағы да басқа жерден Аманжол шықты, Мұхамеджан Тазабеков.
After the revival of aitys, such akyns as Серік Құсанбаев, Жадыра Құтжанова, Альфия Орманшина, Аманжол Алтаев, Мұхамеджан Тазабеков, Ахмарал Леубаева and others were discovered, and according to their own words, they are the poets who imitated different poets. They say each time has its own heroes. For example, even in the Soviet times, we talked about pressing problems that bothered us. And now they're talking about the problems of language and religion. But all of these problems have already been discussed long ago in the 1980s. For example, last year, the topic of renaming of the cities was raised during the international aitys. In the 1990s, when we didn't gain our independence, I said during aitys, an old wound bothers in my heart. We have a Goloshokin station as a monument to the tyrant who destroyed the Kazakhs, like a frozen page of the history. It is easy to say these things now when we have our independence, but in the Soviet times it was not easy to talk about this. But despite it, we still raised such topics, we still spoke about them. And yet it gave its results. They began to change the names of the villages. The Goloshokin station was renamed to Tuyeli. The current akyns are the ones who sing at a time when there is a freedom of speech, freedom of expression. Howbeit, there is a freedom of speech. Of course, this does not mean that it is necessary to overuse it to perceive democracy as chaos or anarchy. But if you say the right things and there's freedom, in our time there were many ears that controlled us from all balconies.
Қалай да болса сөз бостандығы бар. Әрине бетіне кетіп, демократия дегенді жаңағы хаос деп, анархия деп түсінбей, жөнімен айта білген сөздің бостандығы бар, қалай болғанда да. Ал біздің кезімізде жаңағы балконда болсын, ол жерде болсын, бір қарауыл отыратын, бұлар қандай сөз айтады деп.
What should a quality aitys contain?
Айтыстың ішінде жаңағы
Good aitys is first of all based on mutual respect. Secondly, poetry, the beauty of the words, the verses, which are so catchy and later become so widely used that then they turn into popular phrases. Of course, the public cannot remember everything, but the words that pierce into their very heart and beautiful expressions will surely be remembered. In general, it is difficult to judge the art of aitys because it is a subjective opinion. Aitys can be compared to wrestling. During wrestling, when two people fight, we always see the knockdown, but in aitys it is difficult to see. One may think that someone was defeated, but the second member of the jury, on the contrary, can say that he won. It all depends on the understanding of the words and the presentation of the thoughts.
Сіздің мақамыңыз
Your melody is special. Who is its author?
Мен ол мақамның авторы жоқ деп ойлаймын. Мен оны мысалы ең бірінші
I think this melody has no author. When I first went into aitys, I tried to sing my poems accompanied by the dombra. And when I sang my poems, I tried to harmoniously link them to the sound of the dombra. And then such musical arrangements appeared. I don't think that this is someone's specific melody. I don't even know where it came from. I just took my poems and used this melody. And I don't think it has an author. Nobody taught me this. But I cannot also say that I am particularly talented since I composed this melody. It just came to me. Therefore, I am the author. But I do not know where it came from.
ол маған қайдан келді, мен оны білмеймін.
айтыс өнерінде де
Aitys is also the art of pleasant melody, motive rhythm, isn't it?
Әрине. Мысалы қазіргі кезде әуеніне қарап ешкімді айыра алмайды.
Of course, there are times when a listener cannot identify the performer, but they recognize me. Serік Kostanay were recognizable too. This is how we differ in the history of aitys. I think that each master should be different and have their own style.
Ерекшеленіп тұрғаны жақсы шығар деп ойлаймын.
айтыстың өзі бірнеше түр.
Aitys is divided into several types. Kaim aitys, bayadik aitys. What other types exist?
Айтыстың түрлері көп. Қазір ұмытып қалған түрлерінен гөрі ұмытылмай.
Aitys has many types. If we talk about those that still exist and have not become extinct, then this is Qaim aitys and Suri aitys. I've also mentioned that there is aitys between a mother and child, a young woman and a young man, a father-in-law and a daughter-in-law. There are many types of aitys, but I think it would be out of place to tell anyone to engage in a certain kind of aitys. This should depend on the akyn's outlook on their creative vision.
Сіз бір сұхбатыңызда айтыс менің азаматым.
In one interview you said, Aitys revealed my citizenship. What principles in life are you true to?
Мен өзім
I'm a very straightforward person. In an interview I once said that I'm not the final station of truth. I say it as it is, from the perspective of how I value life, how I understand this world. If I consider that something is wrong, I say it is wrong. If it is right, I say it so.
Ескі айтыстарыңызды жиі қайта.
How often do you watch your performances and do you miss Aitys and the stage?
жалпы мен өзімді экраннан қарамаймын. Қарағым келмейді. Бірінші кезде қарайтын да мен ойлаймын отырып.
I do not watch my performances on the screen at all. I do not want to. At first I used to watch, and then I began to think, oh, I should have said this, I should have said that. Or if I had said this, it would have turned out like this. And I think that a person should not regret about the past, and what was done is done. We should not wait in fear for the future, but should live in the present. This is my principle. Therefore, I do not watch myself. I do not want to experience the past. These performances received a well-deserved assessment. I am not the same person I was in my 30s. My experience at the time and the wisdom of the present are absolutely incomparable. Therefore, I don't want to look at the past with today's experience.
Айтысты сағынам. Айтысқанды жақсы көрем. Айтысқым келеді де. Бірақ
I miss the stage. I miss aitys. I love to compete in aitys. And I even want to participate in aitys, but now I do not want to compete with young people who can step over me for a reward. At one of the large-scale aitys, I heard one akyn saying about the other who received the main prize, "Until he dies, we cannot see the reward." Therefore, I don't want them to talk about me in the same way. This does not mean that I am confident that I will defeat everyone. But of course, I want to compete in aitys culturally, meaningfully, and beautifully.
біз сахнадан ерте қуылдық. Өзімізден кейінгі келген ұрпақтарменен. Сен неғып жүрсің, неге кетпейсің деген сияқты.
We were ousted early from the stage by the younger generation. We began hearing, What are you doing here? Why do you not leave? Now they're trying to oust Aybek Aliyev, who is just above 40, but there are people who say go away to him, and he only reached his artistic peak. I will not generalize and talk about all the young people, but I think those who ousted others will recognize themselves very well. The stage is nobody's property, right? Aitys is an art. Why can an opera singer, aged 80 or 90 years, perform in public? Why did Jambul Jabayev compete in Aitys up to 90 years? Why did Chashubai perform? Why at the time nobody ousted Manap Kokenov, Koken Shakeyev or Khalikhan Altambayev, but on the contrary, they followed them. We revived Aitys, and when Aitys was in a full bloom, we had to leave the stage. But we are the generation that did not have time to fully enjoy Aitys. Many akyns of our time still have creative potential. That's how I think.
Мен өз басым мысалы солай деп санаймын.
Уақытыңызды бөліп бізге сұхбат.
Thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you.